it's probably better than whatever you were doing in the car on Monday morning anyway. It always drives me crazy when I'm listening to a podcast and somebody says, and now let's take a break.
We're going to pause for station identification.
Get to it fast. Right here on the Anycast. Make it strong, make it last. Right here on the Anycast.
All right, I'm here today with an OG podcaster, geeky musician, family man, doer of all things. I'm running out of the right intro words here, but the one and the only Dave Hamilton. Dave, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on the Anycast, Matt. I'm happy to be here.
It's probably been a long time coming, but I mean, it only took me 20 years to actually have a podcast. So
that's okay.
That was most of the delay.
You were doing other things.
Yes. Before we get going, I don't want to, other than the amazing intro I already delivered, I don't want to put too many words in your bio that may or may not be true. So in 2 minutes or less, who are you? Where did you come from? What are you promoting? And then everybody can fast forward 2 minutes and skip all that and get to the good stuff. But
yeah, I'm Dave Hamilton. I am a podcaster and publisher. I started in the online industry when we created the Mac Observer in 1998. That was acquired in 2021. In that period of time, I also started the podcast that I do. Well, all three of them, in fact, Mac Geek Gab, Business Brain, and Gig Gab, each for geeks, business nerds, and music nerds. So tech geeks. Yep. And then a company called Backbeat Media, which, as I like to say, represents the sponsorships for a group of fiercely independent podcasters, of which I am one. So that's what I do.
There you go. Okay, that is definitely not what I would have said, so I'm glad you said it instead of me. There's so many places I'd like to dig into. I'm going to stick with our podcasting track here. So you alluded to the fact, you've kind of been around the industry since its infancy. What was the genesis of what was the first show, and what was the genesis of starting the first show?
Right. So we had the Mac Observer going, and I went out to a dinner. This was in 2005. So podcasting as we know it had already kind of begun 6 months earlier or so. And a guy named Mike Dunn from Hearst was there. He did a lot of M&A for them, and Robert Scoble was there, and he was still with Microsoft, I guess he was still with Microsoft at that point. And I forget what conference it was, but it was some dinner in New York, and Mike needed a ride back to Stamford, Connecticut, and I was going that way, so I took him to Stamford. And in that ride, he's like, "You guys need to be doing podcasting at Mac Observer. It's like that. You're going to miss out if you don't do this. You got to do this. You got to do this. Got to do this." So it's a 45-minute ride or something from Manhattan back to Stamford. And then on the ride from Stamford to where I was living up in New Fairfield, there's another, 30 minutes or something. And I was like, maybe, sure. And then we were moving from Connecticut to New Hampshire, and I was coming up here. It was about a 3-hour drive. I was coming up here once a week to check on the progress of like some renovations we were doing at the house. And I was listening to a lot of Daily Source Code back then, Adam Curry's podcast at the time. And I liked what he was doing. I liked the way he was doing it. And I especially liked the sort of audio nerdiness mixed with the tech nerdiness, because it took at that point in time, there was no like bespoke app and piece of hardware you could just buy and go do a podcast. You had to sort of understand the way analog sound might get into a computer, and then also how to make it sound good, and also how to release on time and all the things. So it was this amalgamation of everything that I had done in my life, because I'm a musician, as you mentioned. I was always the one with the PA at my house because I'm a drummer. So I had learned a little bit about gain structure and like microphones and EQ and that sort of thing. So I was like, yeah, all right, I'll start this podcast here at the Mac Observer. We'll do it once a week, and then I'll pass it off to somebody else. You already know that I failed at the second part of that. But
delegating is hard.
Yeah, well, and there's a reason. So I started the show. The first episode was called TMO to Go, the Mac Observer to Go, because you can take it with you. After we finished the first episode, my wife was like, "You should call it the Geek Gab." I was like, oh, that's a great show. So we called it the Mac Geek Gab because back at that point in time, that was really Apple's only product. Obviously, that has changed. But we did this, and I don't know if you've ever heard that. You've probably heard this story, but Apple we started in June of 2005. In March of 2005, Apple had announced that they were going to add podcasting to iTunes, right? And so, great, awesome. It was Steve on stage. It was clear this was a pet project of his. We knew it was coming 2 weeks after we had launched our show. So as soon as we launched our show, I start calling everybody I know at Apple. And I'm like, okay, I want to make sure I'm in your directory on day one. And this was when Steve was running Apple. And of course, everybody at Apple was like, well, it's not me. And if I tell you who it is, I could get fired in an elevator someday by Steve. And I don't want that. I'm like, okay. And this happened with like 6 different people that I knew. And I thought, this is stupid. What a dumb way to run a company, that your CEO's pet project that he was on stage, like pouring love about, no one wants to talk about, just the person who's in charge of it. Like, this is weird to me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, if I was the CEO of that company, I would want to know. Idea. So I write Steve an email, and it was a simple email. We'd exchanged a few emails over the years with Mac Observer. Most of them weren't all that productive, but it's okay. I shot Steve an email and said, hey, we just launched this podcast. I know you have your directory coming. I want to make sure we're in your directory. 20 minutes later, my phone rings. Hi, this is Keith. I run the, iTunes podcast directory. Great. We just got your email. Yeah, I know where it came from. He's like, yep, we actually already had you in the directory because we had slurped in the OPML file that was floating around the web. I just didn't know which version he was going to get, like, because we were so new to the thing. But he's like, no, we have a current version of it. It's all fine. You're there. And you're right. Your show is great. We're going to feature you on day one. Amazing. And that was also the same week as Macworld Expo New York in the summer. And so there was this huge flood of listeners that went from like, we maybe had 1,000 listeners, which nowadays is actually pretty good. But the way we got that was we just stuffed the show into the RSS feed for the Mac Observer itself initially. Yep. But we went from 1,000 listeners to like 25,000 as soon as the iTunes store launched. At that same point in time, we stumbled on the format for the show because on week 3, I did not know what topic we should do for the show. And I thought, well, let's pretend we got questions in and let's answer those questions. And now 19 and a half years later, the questions haven't stopped coming. So that's the format. But I was stuck as the host, at least for a while. And then it was like, screw it. I'll just keep doing it. It's fine.
Yeah.
So, but that's how I got started in the podcast business.
Yep. Well, right place, right time seems like a little bit of it. I want to dive more into Mac Geek Gab just before I zoom back out. So how many, you got to be over 2,000 episodes or around 2,000 episodes?
No, we are at, the next episode will be 1067. So
okay.
10, yeah.
Only off by 1,000.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I personally have made more than 2,000 episodes of podcasts with Gig Gab and Business Brain sort of in the mix there.
So when was the last time you went back and listened to episode 1?
Probably at some point earlier this year. I occasionally do. It just comes up. It's easy to find, and I will go back and listen. It's awful. It's terrible.
Yeah. Cringy? Is that the...
Oh, yeah. It certainly makes me cringe. I assume it would make all of our listeners cringe, but it's fine. Like, whatever. Here's the thing. When we started, I had one prime directive, because there can be only one prime directive, and that was release on time. And so I built a workflow that it largely persists to this day. It's evolved, but it's basically the same thing, where when I'm finished recording, we do all our work, our prep work in advance, our production work in advance. We mix the show live in real time, and then I can publish within 15 minutes of finishing recording. Often we record days before the episode is due to be released. That's just based on our schedules, but that was the prime directive. The second directive, the secondary directive, if you will, was decent audio quality because I didn't want to beat people's ears up. That was it. Nowhere in there was quality content part of the mission because I knew if we had the ability to keep doing it, we would get better with the content that would happen automatically.
Right. Going back into that Wayback Machine.
Yeah.
I would say it's probably pretty common knowledge today that you want to keep a consistent release schedule.
Yes.
Yada, yada, yada. It probably was not so common at the time because there was not really a body of people. Why was that the prime directive?
I think there are two reasons for it. Number one is that I know I'm a perfectionist, and I also know I knew everything else I had on my plate at that point in time. So I knew if I gave myself the opportunity to get up out of my chair after I finished recording, it would be days or weeks before I sat down in that chair to publish that episode, to produce, to edit, to do all those things. So that was definitely part of it. But the other part was we had been publishing Mac Observer for, 8-9 years at that point. So I understood the value of consistency with getting things out there. We had a lot of columns that were published weekly, and we would always, Monday's Mac Gadget was always published on Monday, and Apple Trader was always published on Friday. So that was just part and parcel of my mindset at the time. So I think those two things congealed to be like, you got to have a consistent release schedule. Otherwise, this thing's not going to work.
Right. And I heard at least 2 drummer jokes I could make in there, but I'm not going to make them.
Feel free. I love the drummer jokes.
Well, I was going to say it would be odd for a drummer to really care that much about being on time, but
this is true. Yeah.
Yes.
I should accelerate the release schedule. Do it for 7 days at first, then 6, then 5.
Just change it. Yeah. Just a little bit.
Then go back to 8. That's right. Yeah.
As far as the audio quality part, though, that's obviously, the interesting thing about this podcast in particular, I would think it sort of ticks all your geeky boxes all together.
Yep.
Like you get to scratch the audio itch, you get to scratch the let's talk about cool tech itch, you get to do a little bit of the business side of it itch. So can see how it would all come together for you. But talk about the audio itch, because today it's maybe easier, so people are maybe more prone to care about their audio quality. But certainly in the early days, there were plenty of people that I remember there was a service somebody was promoting that was like, you just call in and it records it and it turns it into a podcast.
Yeah.
And it's, as good as your cell phone connection is to whatever weird, PBX system. So
I'm glad that you brought up scratching the audio itch. I have this little fan going in my studio that is driving me crazy for audio quality. So I'm going to take this opportunity to stand up.
We're going to pause for station identification.
This stupid fan. It's a new little fan and it has a remote control on it, but evidently not from 10 feet away. So, oh gosh, that's so much better. Now I can relax. That's part of it though. What you just saw there, like my obsession with having good sound. I know that you folks, we all are going to be listening to podcasts in our own noisy, terrible acoustics environments, right? You're going to have bouncy walls and road noise from your car or whatever. You might be listening on headphones, in which case you may have a pristine environment. But even then on headphones, especially then perhaps, you don't want to hear my noisy environment added to yours, right? I think that's part of where it came from. Part of it was listening to Adam Curry and his daily source code. He also is an audio geek. He cares about using noise gates and compression and using the right microphone and all of those things. And so I had it in my head, but I also knew about microphones a little bit from being on stage, and I knew that dynamic mics and I'm going to generalize here, of course. I'm using a condenser mic here, which is pretty good at off-axis rejection and things like that. But in general, dynamic mics are better for tighter work, whereas condensers in general, again, will pick up sort of everything in the room. So I that's where that came from in my brain. And then I knew how to plug audio cables in together to make things work. Like I knew how to take a microphone, a PA, a mixer, a power amplifier and a speaker and wire them up together to make the noise from the microphone come out of the speaker. Right? Well, but that was important because, and I also knew how, if I needed to put an EQ in the mix, like where to put that and those sorts of things. And that was really valuable when I started using a piece of software at the time. It was called Audio Hijack Pro, which essentially was the ability to do that in software, because I needed to get my first show, Mac Geek Gab, was a friend of mine, John Braun, who lives down in Connecticut. I was moving away from Connecticut for the second time. He worked for us at Mac Observer. He wrote some things for us. He and I had been nerdy since I was like 15 together. And I was like, oh, this will be a great way for us to stay in touch once a week. We'll do the show together. But it meant figuring out which VoIP service to use at the time. And it was Skype. We tested all of them, and then how to wire that together so that his audio and my audio could be mixed by me in real time and recorded. And so it involved my audio coming into the computer, his audio actually coming out of the computer into an external mixer that I then fed back in. It was so convoluted, but it allowed me to essentially run it like a radio station.
Yeah.
But all of it was predicated on using noise gates and compression and the right microphones, all the things that fall under the category of gain structure, to keep the sound as tight as possible so that wherever you heard it, you heard us and nothing else. And there's an asterisk there. I got it so tight early on that I actually added, and I still do it to this day, I add a touch of reverb back in to take us in however many rooms we're in. Now we have 3 hosts on Mac Geek Gab, and sort of put us all in the same reverb room, just a touch. But it's the obsession with sound.
Yeah.
My co-hosts laugh at me for it regularly, but they also know that it's good. Like they'll laugh at me and they're like, but don't stop. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We're going to leave it up to you, but don't stop.
Have you noticed as podcasting has gotten more mainstream that there has been a noticeable shift in one direction or the other generally in production quality?
And maybe this speaks to it. The shows I listen to, I think all sound pretty good.
And always have.
Yeah. And always have. But I think maybe that speaks to, well, I don't want to listen to crappy audio. Like, I'll forgive it if it's, somebody's got a guest on that I want to hear from, and the guest chose to use their laptop from across the room, and it's like, okay, I gotta, just fight through this. But it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Good audio is not exhausting. So
fair to say the audio is important to you. Well,
it is.
Yeah. There has to be more to the magic formula that gets a show going this long. Viewer questions obviously were the original secret sauce.
That was it. Still is the secret sauce.
Yeah.
Well, some way of engaging with the community, and it can be certainly answering people's tech questions is it turns out, a pretty easy way to get people to love you and feel connected to you. But there are other ways, right? Like with we do this with Mac Geek Gab. We also do this with Gig Gab, where we have a community on Gig Gabs is on Facebook. Mac Geek Gabs is in Discord. I love Discord so much more than Facebook for that because you get to control your own community. You're not just managing somebody else's group. But just finding a way to make your audience feel like the show is theirs is a great way to keep people sticking around. And one of those ways is like a Patreon style thing too. If people give you money, if you can get to a point where you can convince people to give you money to support the show, at that moment that they give you the money, they have just like doubled their emotional investment in your show because they've sent money to you.
You have Patreon today?
Well, yes and no. We don't use Patreon because my career is full of things that I created is the wrong word, created for myself and never thought to share with anybody else. Like at Mac Observer, I wrote our first content management system from like Scratch and PHP. If I was smarter, I would have sold that, and then I'd be on my private island instead of in New Hampshire. It's nice in New Hampshire, though. I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
So we cooked up our own, listener support system, which now is all tied into WordPress for us. But if I was going to do it again today, I'd use Patreon because it's turnkey. I don't have to create it.
Sure.
Yeah.
When do you remember when the first dollars and cents came through the system to support the podcast?
Yeah, it was probably about 2 years in. People started saying we want to support, we want to make sure this works. Now we had advertising almost from day one because we had Backbeat Media selling ads for all our websites, which were also at that point in time all in the sort of Apple community. So we had all the relationships. We knew how to sell sponsorships. We knew how to build packages and all that. So it was fairly easy. I don't think we were the first ones selling ads on podcasts, but we were, among the first, I would think. So they and obviously we were very upfront with our listeners that that's part of what kept the show going, but they wanted to contribute. And I was really on the fence about it, about how to do it. Not that I was against it, but I didn't want to roll something out that didn't have any longevity to it. I didn't just want to say, sure, send us money if you want, because I know the first dollars are easy to get from people. I want to, monthly recurring revenue is always a good thing. So I hadn't figured that out yet. I hadn't put a lot of time into figuring that out. And so people, especially like this time of year, the holiday season, would just send us Amazon gift cards for things, for whatever we wanted, to use. And so we would split those up amongst the two of us at the time. So people figured out ways of taking their money and putting it into our pockets. Yeah. And that was flattering and it showed that there was a there. And eventually we did roll out a premium program. We overthought it. We gave people an extra 2 episodes a month that were behind a paywall that didn't have ads in them, and gave them a priority email address that they could use for their questions that we would answer first. After about 1.5 years of that, our premium listeners, I don't think they banded together, but many of them in the course of a 6-week period came to us and said, hey, that we're the ones who listen who have disposable income, right? So why are you hiding your advertisers from us? We want to be the ones to support you that way too. So don't give us ad-free episodes. I was like, oh yeah, that's a dumb idea. It's weird to me that that's the first thing anybody that does Patreon does is takes the ads out. It's like, well, are these the people you want to? I mean, I had to learn the lesson too, right? It wasn't obvious to me either. And then they also said, we believe in this community that exists around the show. It sucks that the questions you're answering for us aren't shared with the community because they're only in the paywalled episodes. So they're like, take the paywall down, let us hear the ads, just give us the priority email address and that's good enough. I was like, okay. So we did. We watered down the premium program. I think at the point we had, 1,000 subscribers or something to the premium program, which is amazing. And so I remember sending out an email to all of them explaining what we were doing. And we got a ton of responses. There was a handful of them where people were like, well, this sucks. You just, took things away. And the rest were like, great. Thank goodness. This is the way it should be. This is the show I wanted to support, not this bifurcated thing. So yeah, if there's a lesson there, listen to your listeners, right? And don't take the ads away from the listeners who have the money.
That's when you put it like that, it makes a lot of sense.
I know.
But I don't think it's intuitive to go there first.
Oh, clearly it's not. I didn't go there first, and neither does anyone else. Because, and I think part of it, though, is having, I'm going to use a different word, making your sponsors relevant for your audience. Because if the sponsors are just, if the sponsorships feel like throwaway things that you have to do in order to pay some bills, your audience is going to interpret it that way. And then they too will want they want a way to take the ads away, right?
Yeah.
It always drives me crazy when I'm listening to a podcast and somebody says, and now let's take a break. No, you don't want to tell your audience to take a break while you're talking to them about your sponsors. That seems, I understand if you're like pre-recording your ads or something, it is a break for you as the podcaster in terms of you get to stop talking because you've got a recording of you talking for 2 minutes or whatever. But don't say it that way. I always say to people, and now I'd like to tell you about so-and-so. And I'd also like to tell you about this sponsor and doing it that way. And making sure your audience understands that you want these things because they're there for you.
Right.
You know, we attract like-minded audiences, and it's an aspirational thing often, right? The audience wants to be more like you. So if you literally tell them, I don't like these sponsors, we're treating it as a break, it's a throwaway thing, they will believe you.
Right.
Don't do that.
And there's something like there's an implicit thing that happens where, you know, people don't like to be sold to is this sort of weird thing. And I'm like, everybody I've ever met loves to be sold to.
Yes.
And like they love it. But what they
We all
don't
love
like,
it. Yeah.
nobody likes to be sold to about something you're not actually sold on yourself.
Correct.
But like, oh my God, you had an amazing restaurant experience? Tell me more. Sell me on it. I want
Word
to. Should I
of
go
mouth.
there?
Yes.
Yeah. Like, tell me. I would love to know. Sell me. So it's the context, to your point, right?
Yep.
Is that, I mean, that I don't want to say it's a luxury, but there has to be something in your sponsor acquisition process that also has to be part of that, right? Like you can't be passionate about whoever we sold to this week.
Correct. And this is something we do at Backbeat Media, you know, company wide for everyone, not just for my shows, but it certainly comes, you know, I say that thing about being fiercely independent podcasters, and I am one. That informs how we treat all of the shows that we represent here. Is how I would want to be treated as a podcaster, because it turns out I am one. We vet every sponsor before we put your show on a proposal or my show on a proposal. I look at the sponsor and it's like, can I find, can I find or is there something about this sponsor that I can get behind, that I feel like my audience could benefit from, that I feel like I could benefit from if it's something that would target me. And so, and we do say no to certain things. It's like, yeah, that I don't see a fit here. I can't say yes to this if there's not a fit just for the money, because that's short-term gain, and very few businesses survive on making short-term gains. And if they do, it's a hard row to hoe. You're just constantly working it. I don't want to have to go get another 50,000 listeners. It's hard enough getting the first 50 and keeping them. So
sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk about being a fiercely independent supporter of podcasts. When you say that, is there a New Hampshire like podcast free or die thing? Like what does that mean?
It means a lot of different things. I started saying it when I realized what types of podcasts we attracted here at Backbeat. It's not a term I applied to myself first. It's a term that just came up as I was looking at, this podcast only wants to do things this way, and this podcast only wants to do things that way. And gosh, it's all these fiercely independent people. And I was like, well, to be fair, I have my own hangups about things too. That's where that comes from, is just, I do things my way for my shows and therefore for my audiences, and it works. And if I changed the way I do things to match, say, the way you do things, that would be good if I had your audience, but I don't. I have my audience. So I got to do things. I got to kind of keep doing things my way so that there's that consistency for the audience there. And we use that term here at Backbeat for a lot of reasons, but one of them is to ensure that any shows that are coming into the family know that we're not here to homogenize. You get to be you, and then we're here to support you. And we don't make our shows say we're part of the Backbeat Media Network. They can if they want, like it's fine, but we aren't using, and we're missing out, I know, on having the shows promote us. But at the same time, I think there's shows that we have that wouldn't be here if that was part and parcel of how we do things. So
Sure.
Yeah.
When you think of what makes a show a good fit for Backbeat, do you have that same prime directive criteria? Like, is it somebody who releases on time and has good audio quality first and foremost, and then?
That's interesting. Probably. I never thought about it that way. I never thought about the audio quality part of it. I've certainly thought about the release on time thing, because if I can't predict and rely upon whatever schedule you set for yourself, then it's very difficult for us to do our job in placing sponsors, because the sponsors are, if we're working with an agency, the agency's going to want to know, because the sponsor's going to want to know. And if things move around too much, that causes a lot of friction. And I don't want to be known as the company that is, difficult to work with because of scheduling. Certainly it happens sometimes. Everybody understands, but you don't want it to become a habit, like those kinds of things. So schedule-wise, yes. Audio quality, probably. I mean, I listen to the shows. If it sounds like crap, it's like, well, they're probably not going to have a big audience anyway. And we sort of break this rule occasionally, but in general, we're looking for shows that we can represent individually. And therefore, that means a show that can stand on its own somewhat. We're not looking to just do shotgun buys across the network or anything. Certainly, we package shows up and sell multiples at the same time and benefit from that sort of economy of scale. But we really try to work with shows. So, if you don't have at least 3,000 to 5,000 downloads an episode, certainly we can sell less than 5,000. We can even sell less than 3,000 an episode. But what we've found, and this is why we have the rule and sometimes break it, is that shows with less than 3,000 downloads an episode might not last long enough for it to be worthwhile for us to put the effort into selling for them. Because that's the worst, is, putting an effort in and somebody saying, yeah, I'm going to hang it up. Okay, great. Thanks. I mean, it happens. Like, I get it. But at the same time, once somebody's got 3,000 to 5,000 listeners, they've invested something in this.
Right. How does one get 3,000 to 5,000 listeners in the 2024 podcast universe with 4.5 million podcasts to choose from? Like, it seems like it made sense in 2005, which is you get in the directory and then people listen to it, and that's how you have an audience. Today, it's you're looking for a needle in a large haystack-sized pile of needles. How would you tell somebody to stand out?
So the good news is most podcast listeners are always eager to find another good podcast, right? Most people that listen to podcasts aren't like, I will only ever listen to these 3 shows and nothing else, right? They're in it. They like the whatever it is they like about listening to podcasts, they like. And so if there is something else that would appeal to them and fit for them, they're going to be into it. And so one of the best ways to get your show out there is to partner with other shows and promote each other in your episodes. Because if I'm promoting, a show here, I know at the very least that every single person listening listens to podcasts. And that's a pretty good way to begin narrowing down who you're going to market to, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to convert you. You're already here. I just need to let you know about my show. And if my show is good for you, great, you'll try it. And if it's not, well, you won't. Or if the pitch is crappy, then also they won't. But So
following that thread, whose job is it to get more people listening to podcasts? This is not the first time I've heard the premise. The goal isn't to get more people listening to podcasts. The goal is to get people who are listening to podcasts to listen to podcasts for longer. I would need to build a math formula for this, but at some point, I don't think the industry continue to say the goal isn't to get new people listening to podcasts. The goal is to get people who are listening to listen longer. Like,
right.
You can only extend that so long.
No, we need to get more people listening in general, but that is happening, right? Year over year, there are more and more people listening to podcasts, and it's because some of these shows wind up sort of breaking out to a point where people have FOMO about, well, how am I, how do I listen to that? All my friends are talking about it. How do I do this? Right. So that word of mouth thing is usually a big part of what sort of just continues to drive, and the lower friction for actually listening to a show. We're still at a point. I always say nobody ever listens to a podcast accidentally. Right. It's not like you get in your car and it happens to be 9:15 a.m. So you're listening to the morning zoo because you had the radio on the night before and they had classic rock hour, whatever it was. Right.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen with podcasts. It's very intentional.
It is. I mean, I say the same thing differently. I said, my mom never calls me to tell me she successfully tuned into a radio station.
Bingo.
Right? Like, you never believe it. I turned the dial to 87.7 and the sound came on.
But that used to happen.
It used to happen, but there's
they
a
didn't
generation
call to talk about it, but
right. But there's a generation of people where it's like, but it's still noteworthy that they did successfully listen to the podcast that they were trying to listen to.
That's right.
They accomplished something.
Yeah, I feel that way too. I mean, part of it is I always listen in the car, and it's like, crap, I forgot to subscribe to that show before I got in the car, and now I can't listen to it without, breaking that 6 different laws,
Right.
And endangering everyone around me and all that good stuff. So, there is still friction there for sure.
Yeah.
But it's gotten way lower. I mean, think about what it was like in 2005. If you wanted to listen to a show on the go, you downloaded it to your computer and then synced it to your portable device of sorts, an iPod, hence the term, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't need to happen now, thank goodness.
Somebody who was on season 1 was actually the person who introduced me to podcasts in 2005. And I remember somewhat vividly, we worked in the same office together, and I came in, and Kurt always had he was always right on the cutting edge of things.
Sure.
So it was like, have you heard about podcasts? And I said, no, what's a podcast? Oh, it's, there's an RSS feed and an MP3 file, and you download it to this, and then you sync it to your iPod. And I remember like staring him dead in the eye and being like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Please don't ever speak to me about this ever again. And so, it was not lost on me 20 years later. I'm like, Kurt, welcome to the podcast. But, and then a week later, he's like, good news. I'm building the new app on Ruby on Rails. And I was like, please stop talking to me. I don't want to hear about Ruby on Rails ever. So it was that level of thing, right? It was like a flavor of the month. You need to know what you at least needed to grasp the concept of what RSS was.
And you needed, I feel like, because your story is not all that different from mine, right? Like, it's a person evangelized this concept to you in a way that for some reason resonated with you and me, right? Like we both.
Oh no, it was dead to me for like 2 years. Like, he said it, and I was like, "This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard." And then 2 years later, we were sponsoring all the podcasts, and we were at the shows, and so that there was an evolution.
There's an evolution, but it is like one of those things, and that still exists today. I mean, the evangelists are many now, right? And sometimes many at the same time, but it's still this thing that you need to choose to do. And even once you've become a podcast listener, it's still a thing you're choosing to do each and every time. I mean, now, sure, I get in my car, and if I was playing a show, it will resume, assuming the app hasn't quit in the background and, all those other asterisks. But sometimes You know, other times though, I've got to like, even in the car, I got to go pick Overcast and like, yep, okay, yep, that's the episode, okay, yep, and you know, so there's friction there.
Yeah, I mean, like really, the only way you accidentally, get to a podcast today is if it's on YouTube and it was the recommendation engine sent it over to you, and that's, I mean,
That's
candidly,
fair.
that's why I put our stuff on YouTube. Is like, who knows? Maybe the algorithm will help.
We do the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works. You know, most of the time it's a couple hundred views an episode, and then occasionally it's 15,000.
Right. And
like,
but those people aren't subscribers, right? They're
No.
Even if it's 15,000 for 5 episodes, the algorithm changes and the 15,000 go away.
Correct. It's not, and it's probably not the same 15,000 for those 5 episodes.
Right.
Right. And to me, the value, and I say this not to speak universally, but truly for me and the way I've done things with my shows, the value is in that core audience, the 1,000 true fans concept.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you start to actually have something that's financially sustainable, when you've got people that are there for you. You know, in the music business, which we talk about on GigGab, by the way. Sorry, couldn't help it. GigGabPodcast.com. It's, there's this concept of hard ticket sales versus soft ticket sales. And what you want to get to is a point where you can sell venues with hard ticket sales, which are people who bought a ticket because you are there, as opposed to soft ticket sales, which are like, you're playing at a festival and there's 50,000 people. And it's like, okay, great.
It's Saturday, and I always go to this venue on Saturday.
That too, right? Yeah. It's a different thing. And I feel like the same thing is true here in podcasting. The hard ticket sales, if you want to call them that for the analogy, are the thing that creates a sustainable value.
Yeah. Staying on that YouTube track, the other thing that I think of as I'm thinking about, generation of listeners on some sort of linear progression. Obviously, the next generation of listeners that could be captured are coming from, what's the polite way to say it? Not people who consume a lot of long form content today. And do not have the attention spans as a result to want to consume long form content today. Is this just like waiting for their brains to mature and get older? Or like, how do we take people who their idea of entertainment is a 15-second TikTok, very shallow, very surface level? How do we get them to think that entertainment is actually not 15 seconds long?
Wow, that's a great question, Matt.
Given your neuroscience background.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think there's a subset of that group of people that will never convert, right? That will always just stay on the 15-second path. But if you're going to convert someone, one way is to show them the whole teaser concept, right? Give them value, and in the same breath, because you got 15 seconds, that you're giving them value, communicate that there is more of this if you were to go from, say, 15 seconds to 150 seconds or 15 minutes, or right, like piecemealing them in slowly. And we do some of that with Mac Geek Gab. We have some of the things we talk about on the show, we call them quick tips. They usually are quick. They aren't always. But things like that we can turn into like a YouTube short or a TikTok. And that is a way we've brought listeners in. We thought, so about 4 years ago, I realized, okay, here at Backbeat, we have these fiercely independent podcasters that have each built their own audience, and they were excellent at that. What most of us here are terrible at is building beyond that, whatever that plateau is. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, okay, well, this is value we can add for our shows. So we hired someone to essentially build this department of show promotion. And we had it all figured out. We're like, oh, we got, this plan, yada, yada, yada. And it's just going to be, we're going to put shorts out there and exactly what I just explained and pull people in. And it turns out what that does is it helps. It's certainly brought some people in, But the noticeable improvement in numbers came from mitigating attrition, keeping people from forgetting about the show. People that were already willing to listen to an hour of content and then for whatever reason got off track. And then, it showed up on Instagram or it showed up on TikTok or it showed up on Facebook. Oh, yeah, I remember. Oh, I got to resubscribe, right? So we had a lot of that. But in terms of new listeners, the thing we found was what I said before, cross-promoting with other shows.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, that's not converting someone from a 15-second to an hour, right?
Right.
None of these things is that.
Right.
So, yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, because like the mental model I have is also, at some point, like the first time I heard it, and I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. My mental model was like, yeah, I'm not going to not listen to the radio to do this.
Yeah.
Right? Like that. I was like, oh, is this going to change my audio listening habits? No. Okay. That was kind of my thing. And part of it is almost every podcast is on a CDN now, thankfully. And people have much more access to bandwidth now. So now it's much more impulsive. It is not something you needed to plan the night before and download and sync it to your iPod and blah, blah, blah. So it's not like something you can't rectify that situation when you're reminded, oh, I just saw the short. Oh, let me go, click, and a second later I'm into the episode. But that world is also, now you're just competing for attention with everything that can gather people's attention on their mobile device. I talk about this a lot, but we had a gaming customer who, we're at their offices and we're going like, okay, what are your metrics? What are you trying to do? How do we help you get better? Like, what does speed mean to you? That's like a common CDN question, right? Like, what is fast? What does that mean? And, how does that against, Fortnite or, your competition? And they go, well, our competition's YouTube. And I was like, I don't know. You're a gaming company. And they're like, right. Our competition is YouTube. We need, when somebody sends a link to the game or somebody wants to play the game, it needs to load as fast as a YouTube video.
Because that's how long people are willing to wait for. That's how long people have been trained that they should wait for entertainment.
Correct. And what it is it's entertainment. It doesn't matter if you're playing the game or you're watching a YouTube video, or you're watching a TikTok, or you're starting to listen to a podcast or whatever. It's just like my brain needs something. I don't really care. Like, I'm on my mobile phone. I have access to all the things.
Yep.
Right? It's not.
It's the great big book of everything. Yeah.
My choice is the radio station or my iPod. Okay. Well, now I have to choose between a podcast or, let's say, the radio in my car. Today, you got your mobile phone. Your choice is everything. So in that sense, that's like a harder. It's even harder for my brain to reconcile that. Like, oh, podcasts are competing with YouTube and TikTok and my email client and sending my friend a text message. But at the same time, podcasts are kind of unique in that you can be doing more than one of those things while you're consuming the podcast, right? You can do it while you're still replying to the email, sending your friend a text, which maybe you can't do in YouTube or a game or something. So it feeds the multitasking bug now more.
That's an interesting way to go. All right, I have a lot to say. The first thing is I have to do
unpack in any order that you would like to unpack.
Well, the first one I have to unpack is the itch that I need to scratch the most, and that is that. And I'm sorry to pick on you, but unique is a binary term, so there's nothing kind of unique about podcasts, right? Unique doesn't have qualifiers, right? It's something is either unique or or it's not.
Well, podcasts are sometimes half pregnant.
Another term of uniqueness.
Yes.
Anyway, what's interesting is you said you're competing against YouTube and my email client and that game I play, right? Like that's what I'm competing against in some ways with podcasts. But as you also pointed out correctly, that like the email client, I can listen to a podcast while I'm doing that. None of those things, the email, watching the YouTube video, playing a game, can be done in one's car. Right. At least not safely, right? Most people aren't going to choose to try and watch a YouTube video in the car. I know there's people that have rigged their cars up to do that. It's fine. It's awesome. Please just don't drive around me. So now that I hadn't ever thought about it this way before, but now that you said that, it's like, okay, when we're hooking that person, right? And I'm thinking, using Matt Geekeb as the sort of case study here, we've got tips, right? You just watched our tip on TikTok or on a YouTube short or something like that. And now we've demonstrated value. Hopefully it's been received. At that point, maybe the call to action is, and if you want more of this, subscribe in your podcast app of choice, and you can listen and learn while you're in the car.
Right.
Because now I've eliminated so much of this competition here. So all I got to do is get you to listen in the car, on the way to work every Tuesday morning. And once I set that habit, all I got to do is not screw it up.
Right. And it is habitual, right? Like, especially
Right.
the car is like your morning commute.
Correct.
Or your afternoon pickup of the kids or whatever that is.
But if I say, new episodes out every Monday, have these tips to start your week on your Monday morning commute. And if I commit that to you, now, of course, I got to deliver, but we've already talked about the prime directives, so hopefully we're good there.
Yes.
Then now we've got something. So I'm starting to think that might be a great call to action for people, is to frame it as, here's, spoon feed it. Here's where you get to do this the next time. And it's probably better than whatever you were doing in the car on Monday morning anyway.
Yeah. Like James Critland, his line was, it's entertainment for your ears when your eyes are busy.
Exactly.
Right. So it's like,
right.
So that's a certain subset of your day. Right. And yeah, if you can get people to think of you in that moment, now that's your habit building, and there's a little payoff in there. They get their dopamine. There's the reward. They got the tip. They're excited to go home and try it. Now there's that habit building loop that's happening there.
That's happening. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But show the value first, and then, I think maybe if we zoom out on this, as soon as you've demonstrated value, the next thing to do is tell people when and where they will listen next. And maybe that's the car, right? For a lot of us, like, that's an easy place, but it could be while you're exercising, while you're going for your jog. Like, pick whatever it's going to be that at least narrows down and filters out some of that entertainment competition. Because if I was to say, and the next time you listen to Matt Geekab will be on your couch at 10 o'clock at night when you're winding down for the day.
The next time you're bored. The next time you're bored.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
No, that's when you got, that's your TikTok or your email client.
Yeah.
You're competing with everything. Like,
everything.
What can unboard me right now?
I can't compete with doom scrolling. If you're committed to doing that, you're going to do that. It's bad for you. That's irrelevant. Yeah. I can tell you that this is better for you, and we'll both nod our heads. And then you'll do that anyway in the moments that you're going to do that. And that's okay. Like that. Well, whether it's okay or not, I've accepted that. So I need to target when you're in a different mindset and one that you are in repeatedly. And so maybe the thing to do, and this is, putting the marketing 101 hat on, is survey your existing audience, ask them, when do you listen? Now the habit was effectively built for X and maybe even Y and Z. Like, you might have a top 3. That's what you put in your call to action. Seems so easy when I say it.
Yeah.
Why didn't we have this conversation 10 years ago?
Oh, it's all solved now. That's good.
It's all solved.
The random tangent, though, that I have to go down, because so my daughter, who will be 8 in January, one of her favorite activities, I don't know why, when she's in a hotel room, is doing a series of forward and backward somersaults from the foot of the bed to the top of the bed and then back down over and over again. And I said, Charlie, what are you doing? She goes, I'm doom scrolling. So
wow.
I don't know where she heard the term, but when she says she's doom scrolling, she means she's on the bed doing forward somersaults.
Her body is literally doing this scrolling.
Her body is literally doing this scrolling. Yes. I don't know where that came from, but
that's awesome though. I like that.
Yeah. Because she told me, I was like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm doom scrolling. And I was like, stood up. I'm like, what are you doing? And then she just
What? What? Where's your phone?
Yeah. And I was like, I don't think you're doom scrolling. She's like, I am absolutely doom scrolling.
Yeah. You try it and see how it feels.
Exactly. Yeah. You're in an interesting spot as both the talent and the business side of things. And I think a lot of people, certainly when they get started, they don't think of having a podcast as an analogy or for running a business. But they tend to find out real quick, especially if they get traction, that it turns out they didn't really start a podcast, but they gave themselves a job. And there are probably other now obligations and tasks that they have given themselves.
You and I would say that's true, and it might be true of the podcasters we know. But as someone who's a musician, there are, and has spent more years as a musician than a podcaster, when you start playing music live, you have also given, that's a business, right? You've given yourself a job. But
you now have a P&L.
If you sit down with a group of 10 musicians, and I'm not talking about people that actually have made a career of this, but 10 musicians that are playing like weekend warriors, I bet 8 of them would have their eyes glaze over when you tell them, so you're all entrepreneurs. You all have been running small businesses for 10 years. What's your best piece of advice for other entrepreneurs? Yeah. Be like, what are you talking about? I work a day job at whatever, yada, yada, and
this isn't my job.
This isn't my job. It's like, well, should be.
I actually heard a weird interview, speaking of YouTube shorts in the algorithm, with Richie Sambora, and he was talking about when he joined Bon Jovi as like a 19-year-old. And he was like, even back then, I was like, hold on. When I'm the Richie Sambora band, I got to pay for my own SNL. I got to deal with getting a truck. I got to do all these things. And when I'm a member of Bon Jovi, I just like show up and play. There's something here.
There's a there there.
There's a there there. This is different.
As someone who runs businesses, in many facets of my life, I go out of my way to not be the business person in the bands that I'm in. I'm happy. And of course, it's impossible not to get involved in that stuff. Just like I always joke that whenever I join a new band, I will never tell them that I know anything about live sound, because as soon as they find out, then I'm going to have to do that at every gig. But what happens at the first gig is if the sound's not right, I'm like, oh, hey, let me help. Let's fix that, because I want it to sound good. Same's with the business stuff. But I try to make sure that I am not the primary person for live sound, and I definitely make sure I'm not the primary person for the business stuff.
Yeah.
I succeed at the second far more than the first.
So when you see a musician, say, who's oblivious to the fact that they've made themselves a job, is there like an artificial ceiling, or is that a benefit or a curse, might be my question first?
Ignorance is bliss. This is a true statement. And so if you're not worried about the business side of it, as long as that ignorance doesn't cause you frustration on the other side, right? You're not getting better gigs. You're not as soon as people say, well, how do I get better gigs? It's like, well, now you need to think about, okay, what does your show look like on stage? What do you mean? What does my show look like? I play music. Yeah, but it's a visual art. It's live music. So what's your costume? What do you mean, what's my costume? Well, whatever you chose to wear on stage is your costume in that moment. That's how the audience sees it. Whether it's you were mowing the lawn and you kept your t-shirt and cargo shorts on, that's a fine outfit. Jimmy Buffett made a huge career of using that as his costume, right? Yeah. But you got to think of it that way. And I damn sure he did. He definitely knew. Just like Sammy Hagar knows.
I've got a new suit. Jimmy.
Whoa. yeah. Right. But these are all choices, whether they're conscious or not. And they are part and parcel of how people perceive your band, and are therefore the reason that, you either get more gigs or don't get more gigs. All of those things are true. So as long as that frustration doesn't manifest, then the ignorance is bliss part can be great. I mean, if you just want to go out and play music for, people that want to hear music, that's a wonderful thing. That's why I do it. But it's like, okay, well, now I got to make sure, the sound's right and this is right. So that I can do the people always, musicians joke, I don't get paid for the playing. I get paid for the hauling the gear and this, that, and the other thing. Well, when you get to a point where you've got other people hauling your gear, you actually do get, it turns out you were getting paid for the performance part of it. Right. However,
you were just reallocating those funds.
You were internally reallocating those funds and choosing not to pay yourself first, which is, okay. I mean, when you're starting a business, that's fine. But
yeah. So for your Joe Average podcaster who maybe doesn't see it, I would say your average new podcaster probably doesn't see it as the same creative outlet thing that your average musician does. I feel like if you're starting a podcast, you probably are trying to give to get a little bit. You want to grow your business, you want to grow your following. You're not necessarily scratching that itch, to use that term again, that like a musician might be like, I just want to get on stage and play music. Nobody who has a podcast is like, I just want to get in front of a microphone. There's usually an agenda of some kind of like they see it as a vehicle to go somewhere. And for all the new podcasters I talk to, for the ignorance is bliss crowd, it's, I'm going to be Joe Rogan, right? Like I'm going to have a podcast and then I'm going to have millions of followers and, good things will come. And maybe that was what it was like to be in a band in the early 70s when it was
right.
like, we're going to get discovered and then we're going to have a big career. And but reality at some point kicks in if you're playing a local, if you start to play local gigs so that you can play an arena, you can't. That ignorance is bliss thing goes away real quick.
It doesn't work. Although I was at I think it was at South by Southwest. It was a small little room full of people watching. Nick Lowe was speaking for some reason. It was a session. Like he was supposed to be there, and somebody asked him like, well, what made you decide to do this? He's like, well, I grew up in Liverpool and it just made sense. It was obvious that, being in a world famous band was one of the jobs that you could pick for yourself. Like, well, cause he's like, we had the Beatles. We didn't realize that this was, as unique as it was to use my term.
Doctor, lawyer, or world famous musician.
Right. It was just like, well, that I can do that. I'll write songs and I'll do that. And so that's why he did that, but for him, the ignorance is bliss thing worked out. But the business part of it kicked in perhaps before he realized how ignorant he was at the beginning. Right.
Yeah.
I would say that there are some podcasters, and I would dare to say the ones who have the best chance of being successful are the ones that say, yes, I want to be in front of a microphone because I have something to say. Now, it also might be, I want to be in front of a microphone because I have something to say and I desperately want other people to hear it. Like there might be a feed my ego with this. But if that's the approach you take, especially with the third part, because I desperately want other people to hear it and react to it and respond to it, that's a path to success. Mm-hmm. Because if you succeed at that, then that's scalable, right? If you can get one person to react to your show and like email you and say, oh my God, this was amazing, or oh my God, you're an idiot, and here's why. Either one of those people is a fan of yours, by the way. Yeah. Somebody that takes the time to write a 5-page email about why they're never going to listen to your show again, thank that person.
Yeah.
They haven't, look at what they invested in you, right?
It's the Howard Stern effect.
It's yes.
People who love Howard listen for 40 minutes. People who hate Howard listen for 90 minutes.
Correct. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. And so like, I think that approach is a sustainable one. Now, it's sustainable if you then build the business to support it. You don't necessarily need the business first. Mm-hmm. In fact, I would say don't bother with that first. Just get out there, see if test the waters, right? And if there's something there, then you got to sort of like, okay, now let's put the infrastructure in place so that this thing can support itself and all those things. But yeah, get out. If you have something to say it.
Right.
and see if there's people, if you're desperate to have people hear it, even better. And I know that sounds vain, but it's exactly what happens with musicians and other creatives too, right? It's like, oh, I could sit in my house and play my guitar, but it's way better when I play my guitar and those people applaud.
Wow.
Are you freaking kidding me? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Like now I had 10 people applaud. Well, if I can do 10, I can get 100. And if I can get 100 people to applaud, I can get 1,000, right? That's how you need to start thinking. It's like, how do I get from 10 to 100? Okay, great. Did that. Do it again to get from 100 to 1,000. Now you're starting to talk here, because 1,000 people applauding, you can't hear each individual clap, and that's a cool sound.
Right. I don't know the metrics, but there's something that's probably true for both the podcasting and the musicians, and certainly for businesses. But you alluded to something. What was the number of people are getting less than 500 downloads? There's a chance it's not going to be here in an amount of time. Certainly less than 500. We look at 3,000 to 5,000 here at Backbeat, but we've also brought on shows that are doing 1,000. But yeah, certainly less than 1,000. It's like because there's like this the new small business statistic, right? Is like 99% of small businesses are going to fail in the first 5 years. I wonder how many podcasters give up in the first 10 episodes.
I think Rob Walsh over at Libsyn probably has that number.
Yeah.
And I think it's very high. They don't consider a podcast active without having a minimum of 10 published episodes.
Right. So that's that threshold of the I had an ambition, I was going to do it, it's going to be great. Oh wait, nobody's really listening. Maybe this isn't what I thought this would be. I'm gonna go do something else with my time now.
I'm gonna go back to watching YouTube.
I would be curious what those numbers are. I think Rob is coming in a future episode.
Oh,
so
good.
I might need to get it from him.
Yeah, he would be a good one to ask.
Yeah, because that's the numbers game that's hard, right? Is forget. We talked about if you're somewhere in the 4.5 million, how do people find you? The hard part is getting to episode 25 or 50 or whatever. There's definitely a magic number where if you make it that far, you're
probably going to keep going.
Yeah, and if you don't get that number, you're probably not gonna.
Yeah, my guess is it's somewhere past the 6-month mark.
Mm.
Whatever your consistent schedule is, if it's daily, fine. That's a lot though. Like be careful what you've chosen to chew on there. But weekly, bi-weekly, anything less frequent than bi-weekly, and I mean that by every 2 weeks. Certainly there are shows that release once a month, but I haven't heard of one that really attracts an audience. But whatever your schedule, if you get past the 6-month mark and you're just rolling and it's part of your life now as a creator that you do this thing, you'll probably stick around. But I think it's 6 months.
Yeah, and I think implicit in that is also the and therefore you can't be in the 6 months measuring what was the feedback, how much applause did I get. Like at 6 months, you still don't if you're starting from scratch.
Yeah.
At month 3, you don't even know if you're good yet, and you're probably not.
Right.
And that you got to push through that, right? Like if you're waiting for your first gig is, I'm sure there are exceptions, but your first gig is always terrible. And if you only used your feedback you got from your first gig as the way you were going to decide if you're going to keep going, you play one gig.
Everybody would play one gig. Everybody would do one episode of a podcast. Yeah. So we started Mac Geek Gab in 2005 in, it would be 2015 was when I started both Gig Gab and Business Brain. And neither of those shows was my idea. I had other friends that came to me and said, hey, I have this idea for a show. Would you be into it? And it turned out that through no fault of my own, both of those shows launched on exactly the same day, which was weird, but fine. But what I told both of those people that were, my co-hosts individually for each show was, we're going to record an episode or two that we don't plan to release just to get into the flow of it and to litmus test this for both of us to see, is this a thing that we want to do consistently? And is there a there? Do we feel like there's something that we have to say? And yes, okay, yes. And then it's like, okay, get rolling. But you gotta know You got to feel it out to see if this is a thing you want to do, because it's not something for everyone.
Yeah, somewhere in the Wayback Machine, maybe 5 years ago, I guess it was pre-COVID, we recorded a couple of test episodes of myself and a co-host and focused more on like cloud and a very specific format. And I was just like, this is not going to work. Like, there's nothing here.
There's nothing to talk about. Yeah.
This is not going to work.
And in retrospect, like, we did that with Matt Geekab. I think we did 2, maybe even 3 episodes before we released what we called episode 1. And it wasn't until episode 3 that we found the formula and pivoted to the Q&A kind of thing. I would say that probably those first 5 episodes should never have been released. If I were doing it again now, I would have held back on those.
You'd have a higher threshold.
Higher
for
bar.
What you think. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, it worked out fine, except that those episodes, and this is my choice, I could remove them, but those episodes are still out there if you want to go listen. So, mgg.fm/1. That's how you get to the first episode. I do not recommend it.
Maybe we'll just release that instead of this entire interview when people come to listen for this interview.
There's so much dead air. God, it is just slow, and man, yeah, I didn't know how to do any of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, like anything, right? You learn as you go. You get better.
Hopefully.
So, I don't know if we encouraged or discouraged anybody who might have been on the fence about starting a podcast to do so, but now you have some ideas of what you could do if you wanted to.
Yeah.
In the end, aside from your second directive of just pure audio quality, does being a musician give you an advantage on camera, on the mic, in the way you approach it? Like, is there something that you carry over from one to the other?
Yes. And I'm answering yes specifically to your last question. I think I have become a better performer both as a podcaster and as a musician because of both of these things. They have fed each other. And I can point to moments where it's like, hey, you never used to say anything on stage. Now, if I need to be the front man, I'm super comfortable doing that. That's that part of it happened here, right? The idea of creating an agenda for, or how I create agendas for the shows that I do, is very much like building a set list for with the band, right? And that's something I learned from that side of things. Like, okay, you got to have some flow to this. And with set lists and agendas for the show, I'm always open to audibles. If the right idea comes up somehow, go with it. Like, if it fits the energy, go with it. And there have been gigs that I've done, and I'm sure there's been podcasts that I've done too, where, if we get a gig Saturday night, I will spend an hour on Friday painstakingly arranging all the songs that we have into a perfectly crafted 3 sets of music. Like, this is amazing. And right before we go on stage, I'll go to pee or whatever, and I'll have urinal inspiration. Like, oh, we got to open with this song. And the whole night is completely different from anything I put together. However, the time that I had spent the day before thinking about all the different permutations and ways that the songs, or again with the podcast, the agenda items could fit together, that's in my head and allows me to do that on the fly. But also I know, well, I've got a net here. If inspiration does not strike, there it is. So that definitely carries over from the stage to this. But I treat a podcast as a live performance. You don't have to. It could be like I prefer playing live to recording in the studio. Once I'm in the studio, I actually love that. But if you gave me the choice at any moment in time, you want to go play a gig or you want to go record in the studio, I'd be like, yeah, let's go play the gig. Yeah. But the studio is a fun thing too, for completely different reasons. It's because you get to sit and craft after the fact, right? You record and then you can go back and re-record and do all those things. So, depending on what fits your brain, you can, like, a podcast can be that way too. It doesn't have to be a live performance. So.
Right. Other than musicians, then, who else do you think makes the best podcasters? Is there another attribute or skill?
Yeah, I don't know that musicians would be at the top of the list of good podcasters. I think anyone who has done public speaking, I know several podcasters that came to it after realizing they needed to get over their fear of just being, present in public and going to like a Toastmasters thing and doing that whole thing. That makes for good podcasters. And I would also think the reverse might be true too, right? And marketers, people who have been, if you've been trained, if you were in debate club, I was never in debate club. We didn't offer that at my school, but I know what it's like to be in debate club. Like you've got to go and prep in a short period of time and then go convince someone of your argument. That feeds the same sort of skill set that you would need to go and do what you and I have been doing here for the last hour plus here. So
yeah. Well, with that in mind, I'll land the plane, but I have a 2-part question for you. First and foremost, where the first / the last 20 years of podcasting, where are we in the life cycle of podcasting? Are we still early? Are we in the middle?
I think we're still early. And I say that because there's so many people that still don't listen to podcasts regularly, right? And I think radio will eventually lose out. Talk radio will eventually lose out to podcasting. Just like music radio has lost out to the streaming services. And again, I realize there's a lot of people that still listen to terrestrial radio, but there's a lot of people that still don't listen to podcasts. There's also a lot of brands, companies, marketers that have yet to dip their toes into advertising on podcasts. And one thing that I can say with a great deal of confidence, and I know there's others out there that say it too, podcasting is one of, if not the best way of getting a message across, of advertising a message, because of what we talked about. People choose to listen to a specific host, and if that host then comes and says, go check this thing out, and does it with sincerity and all the other things we talked about, that's one of the, other than word of mouth, it's effectively word of mouth, right? And it happens on radio too. Like, I know people say, the Talking Points ad model is the NPR model. I call it the Howard Stern model. I think of 1-800-DIAL-A-MATTRESS or whatever the heck the thing was, right?
Yeah.
Like he would do those reads, and here I am, 40 years later, and I remember a name of a sponsor? That's insane. I never bought a mattress from him, but that's because I was 15 years old. Like, wasn't my call. But like, so I think we're still in the early phases, but we might be getting to a point where we're tipping from early to, early middle.
Okay. And so the second part then. So as we do that transition into early middle, let's say we're almost at a new year, at least when we're recording this. Sorry to date. Apparently I'm not supposed to do anything date specific on a podcast.
Sure.
Don't date the episode, Matt.
Doesn't matter.
Let's go 5 years in the future. That takes us to 2030 ish. How do you envision where podcasting is then? And or specifically the fiercely independent podcasters, where is that side of the movement in 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, if we look at the first 20 years, it started as only fiercely independent. So 100% of the market was fiercely independent podcasters because it was the only way that was going to happen. Now it's probably a minority of the market, right? It's probably 30% of the market. I do know that is the 30% of the market. Well, the segment of fiercely independent podcasters who have audiences larger than, say, 10,000, listeners an episode. So we're narrowing it way down. That's not 30% of the market. That's probably 5% of the market. But I know that is a hugely valuable part of the market for sponsors. I think that group gets more than their share of the sponsorship dollars because of that relationship that the listener and the host have, right? It's, you listen to a show like, say, the New York Times, The Daily, right? Even when it was only Michael Barbaro hosting that show, he wasn't the one reading all the ads. He was at the very beginning. And then it was like, oh, we can just have a producer do it. Like, it's totally fine. And I suppose it is totally fine, but that changes that dynamic. It's no longer the person you chose to listen to telling you about the ads. In fact, it's a person saying, let's take a break while somebody else tells you about the ads. It's like, it seems crazy to me. But anyway, we've talked about that. So I think there will always be a place for the fiercely independent podcaster who can carve out their own corner of the market. And there are lots of corners to be carved out. I think that will always be true, but it's even today, and certainly in 5 years, it's not going to be as easy as it once was. And that's true for me too. The shows I started 10 years ago are nowhere near the size of the show I started 20 years ago.
I think in most things, including business and probably including that in building fans, like the early returns compound.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm just now starting to see with Gig Gab, and the format of the show changed dramatically this year too. But like this year, we doubled our listenership with that show. Right. And it was like, okay. But I think part of that is the longevity and part of that is the format change. I don't think either one gets all the credit. So,
right. Yeah. All right. Well, Dave, thank you for your time.
Thanks.
This was entertaining and informative as always. I'm glad I got to see you recently. Hopefully it's not the same gap before next time I see you, but thank you for your time, and this was great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. What a blast. I appreciate you having me on the show. So yeah, thanks very much, Matt.
Thanks, Dave.
This is different, another round, so much more to talk about. Gonna aim to satisfy with help from CacheFly. Get to it fast. Right here on the Anycast. Make it strong, make it last. Right here on the Anycast. The Anycast podcast, brought to you by CacheFly.